Well, welcome to another episode Out of the Blank podcast. I'm here with Melissa.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Well, Melissa, I would ask you, tell me a little bit about yourself,
Yes.
but then I would
Okay.
also ask what defines you.
What defines me? Okay, that's pretty deep. I guess I'll start with a little bit about me, maybe. So right now I'm a PhD candidate at Stanford, and I study human movement. And I study how we think about movement. So how we can move better and how we can think about it in a better way. That's more beneficial for us. But something that defines me, that's a really good question. I think I'm a very curious person and always looking to learn more sort of in all areas of my life, not just, so I'm a researcher, which kind of makes sense with that curiosity, but I think in all aspects, always looking to how can we make this better? How can we better ourselves? And how can we help other people do the same thing?
That's literally your research, basically, just in a more, I guess,
Just
layman
in a
term.
personal,
Yeah.
yeah.
What about movement though? Do you mean like, I mean, when you
Yeah.
say movement, I immediately think like physical human like movements, as in maybe moving my hand up and down, like emphasizing when I
Hmm.
talk, I like to, move my hands a little bit too. Partially I'm Italian, so that also plays a factor into it
Right,
as well
right.
too. But I think it's important because like I always talk about, like if I have if I have a guest or something that's very, very nervous, I will wear a white t-shirt because I don't know what it is about like even color therapy or
Hmm.
color theory. White brings out this positivity rather than if I wore a red shirt, which tends to bring out aggression in some people. And it is just a thought. It doesn't happen with everybody. But I know like when I have someone who's shy, is not a very good speaker. If I'm wearing a white
Mm.
shirt, come with a smile on my face or something like that,
Yeah.
they're very, very open to, okay, this person actually wants to have a conversation rather than if I wore a black shirt and I was like, welcome to the show.
Yeah, I love that. That's so interesting, actually, because I think there is research on the lights. I think green is actually a color that's really energizing. So there is like some research behind the colors that people are seeing and kind of the mood that it puts them in. And different ones are for like relaxing. So I'm curious what white is, but I could definitely see that bringing more of a positive energy. But in terms of human movement, so I study biomechanics, which is basically using math and physics and applying that to a living body, kind of viewing it as a machine so that we can better understand how people and animals move and in a different way than we could just taking measurements outside. So if we model it as a machine, we can then predict what's happening kind of inside of the body. And I use it, I study people with osteoarthritis. So when in the joint, when the cartilage is sort of breaking down, and which tends to happen to all of us as we get older and our joints sort of change, but it can be painful. And so I look at ways that we can move differently to help reduce that pain. And also when we're in pain, we don't really want to move. So trying to kind of overcome that in order to still be active and living kind of an active life. But biomechanics can go into injury and other diseases, human performance. So there's sort of a huge range of
What do you
applications.
think about, like, because I think probably the most common solution for a lot of people that are dealing with pain, besides
Mm-hmm.
maybe taking a pill, a lot of it does
Yeah,
go with the thing of maybe not trying to use whatever is causing that pain, such as if a person has
yeah,
a back injury, they'll tend to use their back less, which
right.
doesn't that create an era of like atrophy or something? Because I know a lot of people like that have like they'll have a cast on their leg for like 6 months or something, so their leg's just out
Yeah,
of commission. But then when they take their
yeah.
cast off, they're like, my leg looks sizably smaller compared to my other one. And I'm like, yeah, it's like you don't realize how fast it happens. It's so quick.
Yeah, it's actually wild, especially women. So women can lose their muscle strength and tone like in a couple of days of not using a muscle. And men similarly, I think in like 4 or 5 days. But yeah, it's very counterintuitive. I think you're right. Like our reaction if we're in pain, it's like we don't want to use that part of our body. But with some diseases, we actually long-term exercise is beneficial for it. So it's kind of overcoming that initial pain. And then when you can strengthen the surrounding muscles and tissues, then that can actually in the long term be beneficial, more stabilizing for your joints and, get that lubricate your joints, and in the long term, it's good for it. But yeah, it's a hard to think about it in that way, especially when you're hurting.
I think a lot of times too, like, have you ever seen like a really interesting documentary to me was, see, I'm a fitness freak. Just I've
Yeah,
gone every day for 9 years, had a key to my gym. Even when COVID happened, I was going, I was like, I don't care.
good for
I've
you. Yeah.
gotten better with it because I mean, before it was a little bit unhealthy. Like I would have like
Mm,
maybe one French fry and then I would go on the treadmill and burn 2000 something calories.
mm,
Just because my brain was like, this is not how it works. I've
yeah.
learned to kind of lessen it. I think with podcasting getting picked up as a new hobby, I've just enjoyed this more than as much as I enjoyed the fitness thing. But
Yeah.
when it comes to a factor of like the Ronnie Coleman documentary was the most, I don't know if you've seen that documentary before.
I think so.
It is
No.
so crazy, but so awesome in my mind because he's a fitness freak guy. So he's broken his
Yeah.
back probably around 9 times. He's had multiple disc
Wow.
surgeries. He's had, I mean, literally in the documentary, he has those things that go on his elbows and his wrists, like crutches, where you see like on South Park, the guy with the crutches for the
Yeah.
arms.
Yeah.
He had those in the documentary, and the doctor was like, if he just stops working out, his body will have time to heal. And he was doing
Yeah.
a 60-pound dumbbell curl as the doctor was saying that. And he was like, I can't stop. I won't stop. I won't stop. But
That is wild.
this guy, he was 0.3% body fat. Now that's less than 1%. Like if you see pictures of him, he was Mr. Olympia 8 times. And you hear his story. He's only 56 years old and he's had multiple fused discs. He's had all these things. He's like, what? Aren't you in constant pain? He's like, oh, every day, every day I'm in constant pain, but I can't leave it. And
Yeah.
it's like, there is a optimal level you want to work out to
Yeah.
where you
You've
are
definitely
actually
gone
healthy.
beyond that.
Yeah. But it's just, that was just so fascinating to me because like it was the only person that I think could understand the addiction I was going through twice a day and
Mm,
stuff like that. I was like, it's that runner's high. Whenever you get a
yeah.
feeling when you're going to the gym, you're like, fuck this. But then when you're leaving the gym, you're like, that was
Yeah.
the best feeling in the world.
Yeah, yeah, I could not agree more. I definitely feel the same way. And this past year has actually been super challenging for me because I think I had that problem where I wasn't listening to my body when I was in pain. And previously it's led to just a lot of stress fractures, but then it's like, okay, 6 to 8 weeks and I'm, ready to go again. And it's not that like debilitating. I can still kind of walk around. It's just painful. But last year I had a pretty serious hip injury and ended up having to have surgery because I wasn't really listening to, the pain I was in and just like kept going. And so that was like, that was 8 months ago and I'm just starting to get back into running and working out now. And I think running was a way that I was able to, relieve stress, and I felt like it was the outlet that I had, and like having that kind of taken away for so long was just really hard. But it's definitely taught me to look for other ways to kind of relieve stress and find that outlet in, creative ways or other ways to move, and not putting so much pressure on like, my well-being being on this one thing of like working out like so intensely. So that's been it's been challenging, but I think it's helped me, learn a lot, and also really value how much your body does for you, and like how important it is to listen to it, because it's you don't want to permanently hurt yourself or something that's going to affect you in the long term. You want to be able to live an active life for a long time, so doing the things to do that where you're not pushing it too hard.
It's very, very hard because I think people sometimes
Yeah.
think that they're kind of invulnerable or invincible when it comes to the fact of
Yeah.
like, oh, that's not going to be me. I'm not going to get hurt like that. I remember
Right.
when I was little, I came across this person that worked with my dad. He was working construction, but a pipe had fallen on his head. So they had built in one of those morphine things into his back to whenever he's like
Hmm.
in pain, they just slowly releases this like chemical into him. And I'm like, the dude you could tell was like drinking heavily. I mean, he didn't seem very, very happy. And it's like those mistakes can happen in your life where you can get hurt. And that does lead to that because it's very, very hard until it happens to you. For instance, I was doing deadlifts
Yeah.
probably about 2 years ago, and I've been dealing with this health condition still today with it. I lifted up and my back clicked. And I didn't think anything of it. I was like, well, that's fucking nothing. Then 2 weeks
Yeah.
later, subtle things started happening where I was not going to the bathroom anymore. I couldn't do certain things. My back even hurts to bend down. It looks like I have to take a poop when I bend down. Um, And I've been going to the doctor. I finally got an IBS medication, all these things, and nothing is
Yeah.
working. And like we're now
Mm.
like I have an appointment getting an MRI to go see if it's a nerve out of
Yeah.
place, which I think it is. But it's like you
Yeah.
don't realize our bodies, for instance, we think that they're like, oh, I could do whatever I want. And they never even think about at any moment you could cut something, you could hurt yourself in some way, you could
Yeah.
land on something wrong, and then you're completely changed for the rest of your life.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. And I think it's also this mindset of like how much maintenance it is to do physical therapy and keep up with these things to help protect it too. So like when your body is in a vulnerable position, like you have the strength and mobility to protect it, but it feels like it's such a chore to like keep it in that way, and also not overexert yourself. But I feel like changing it to kind of what you're talking about, where it's like your body is so precious and valuable, and it's the only body that you're going to have, so you need to take good care of it and want to take good care of it. And for me too, it's helpful to think about when you're moving all of the and eating well, the ways that it's helping your mind too, not just your body. And kind of when you think about it in this like holistic way, for me it's really motivating to actually commit and stick with physical therapy, and trying to stay strong, even though I might want to be doing other things, and also trying to find like fun ways to do that and just like make it part of your life.
I think for a lot of people, like especially if you want to talk about the gym, it's very, very
Yeah.
difficult. Like the first 2 weeks, I always tell people, then just stick with it. It becomes like this, like checking your phone in the morning when you wake up. It just
Right.
becomes part of a routine. I think a lot of it boils down to like uncomfortability factors too,
Yeah.
because it's easier to neglect something than it is to like actually pay attention and focus on
Mm.
what that thing is. You know what I mean? It's so much easier to be like, I'm gonna sweep this under the carpet. I rather
Yeah.
100% for me, I'd rather sit at home and watch, I don't know, something on Hulu and,
Yeah.
whatever, get drunk, whatever, then go out and do a workout in the morning and then go to the grocery store and then do a list of this, of this, of this. And this is why, like, I have a problem with what we would call me days, which is like where you take this one full day of relaxing. I'm like, you wouldn't need that if you weren't like stressed out throughout the day, because as much as you
Yeah.
can consume physical stress, mental stress plays a big part in that too, why a person develops certain habits, certain like especially for if you want to talk about people that overwork out or are addicted to working
Yeah.
out. When you like, I come across it every day at the gym. When I tell them, hey, your membership, you have a balance on it, they get very, very agitated and angry because they have this
Mm.
routine where they scan their card and they get to their workout, they have that on their mind, and now someone is
Yeah.
telling them that they can't do that right now and they have to pay attention to this, and that throws a bomb in their plan. So they just become like, it looks like they're about to murder someone, not like killer wise, but like they seem like, have you ever been uncomfortable like wearing a wool sweater when it's 100 degrees out? Like that whole like it happens when I get nervous. I used to do speech classes. I used to hate speaking in public.
Yeah.
What I would do is I would rub my hands together like this. And then I would also go like this if I fudged up a word, and I would be like, oh, it'd be so uncomfortable and awkward. You'd feel
Yeah.
hot. You feel like your
Yeah.
head's hot. That's what happens with this, because they're showing signs of agitation, irritation. And that to me was
Mm.
interesting, where I was like, yo, what is, like, you could tell that person has
It's like
something
a
in their head.
withdrawal. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's so fascinating. I feel like I can kind of relate to that. I feel like in a couple days of like not exercising or not running, I can feel that agitation inside of me. And I'm like, I need to not talk to anyone right now because I'm gonna be angry, and I need to like go work out and just clear my head. And like I could definitely see that happening, especially if like you just have this plan, and you have this very like strict regimented routine. But I feel like it's so important to be flexible in that way too, because also as you're talking about like chronic pain, and I also had like I herniated a disc and like led to sciatica, and like when you have chronic pain like that, you also don't know what the day is going to bring. So like you might have this really strict routine plan, and then you wake up and you're like in a lot of pain. And so I feel like being flexible and like, okay, I want to work out tomorrow, but I don't know. For me, I like to wake up and kind of feel like, okay, does my body want to do yoga today? Do I want to hard workout? Or you might have something in mind, but then you wake up and you're like, wow, like today is not the day. But then rather than not doing anything, just trying to find something that like meets you where you are, so you're not really dependent and reliant, like, so your well-being is like, all dependent on this like specific activity that you're planning on doing.
Yeah. When you had your herniated disc, what symptoms did you have
Yeah.
that made you realize you had one?
Yeah. So other than a lot of pain in my back, also like pain in my foot and calf, and like tingling and numbness. And I ended up getting a MRI like you're getting. But the thing is it's, you know, you get an MRI, they tell you what the problem is, but unless you want to have really invasive surgery, it's not, I mean, it's good to know what it is, but the remedy for something more conservative is typically physical therapy. So I guess
Yeah,
it's nice to know
I'm
what
not
it
pro
is.
surgery at all. Like that's my biggest fear
Yeah,
in the world.
no, especially back surgery is, you know, kind of scary. And I mean, it depends on what the problem is, but I don't think the outcomes for just like a small to medium herniation is, you know, substantial, where it's really worth the risk of
I
the,
just don't want to like even with back surgery, when they say surgeries, they always toss out like there's a 90% chance. I'm like, stop. When you're giving me percentages, even if it's a higher
yeah.
percent that it's going to be okay, there's still that likelihood possibility. And I feel like I've always fallen in that minority population, I would say. Like if you talk about a person getting their disc shaved down, I'm like, oh my God, imagine if it messed up and you're blowing through a straw to move in a wheelchair. That sounds
Yeah.
awful.
Yeah. Yeah. It's scary. It's really scary. So, yeah, to me, I think any conservative treatment is a great option to consider first, and at least like sticking to it and trying. You know, if you go to physical therapy 3 times and you're not doing your exercises, like that's not going to help either. So, really, yeah, actually having to follow through with that.
Do you think that a lot of this, like, I think, like, especially when it talks about like working out, when you get that runner's
Yeah.
high, like that feeling
Mm-hmm.
of like, oh my God, like, I don't regret doing that at all. It's a great problem solver. Like, that runner's high is, I think, why
Yeah.
people get addicted to the gym a lot too, because that I guess, overwhelming feeling of like just calmness and relief, that chemical that gets dumped into your brain is just it's something that, like, I know they're trying to manufacture that in a pill, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm okay with that because I feel like you have to
Yeah.
do the work to get that.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I feel the same way. It's like just what a, yeah, kind of, I mean, maybe it could help, you know, with people who aren't able to move. Like to me, that would be like a great application, but it's not like, I feel like not for the, you know, average person who can't get up and go get that naturally. It definitely doesn't make up for that. And yeah, it's kind of amazing that not only does it produce like these chemicals like dopamine and things like that when you're running, but it also I think it creates more receptors or allows the receptors for it to be more open. So you can actually, and that lasts like after your run too. So not only are releasing more feel good chemicals, but your brain is actually able to absorb more too. So it's just like all these amazing processes that are going on that I really, no matter how much science is advancing, like don't think could make up for, you know, all the things that are happening inside of your body when you're moving.
Yeah, so I'm not a stoner. I'm not any of those types of like I
I
did
mean,
them.
it's okay if you are. No
It's
judgment here.
they've just been like for me, it's not my type of thing.
Yeah.
I have plenty of family members that do that. It's just for me, it's
Yeah.
just like it's always done this one thing that kind of relates to what you do talk about movement, for instance. I've always
Mm-hmm.
analyzed my body when I was high way too much, a little bit too much, to the point where I was like,
Mm.
my posture's off, my neck's leaning forward, I need to sit straight up like this. Subtle key things that are going to save me in the long run when it comes to
Yeah.
when you get older. By the time it's okay until you hit like your 30s, your 40s, but by the time it hits your late 30s,
Mm.
40s is when you start realizing, oh shit, my neck is hurting 24/7. Even subtle things,
Right.
the way you sleep, if you really take a second and examine your body positioning, you start to notice, okay, my hips are pushed forward like this. And after exposed, I guess, long time to that, it's going to end
Mm-hmm.
up throwing your hips a little bit out of place where you might have like
Yeah.
a pelvic tilt or something like that. And I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
it's stuff you don't even think about when you're young. And then when you end up like really, even if you focus on it, like they're just average day things you neglect, older people neglect, it's just
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
simple.
That's so true and so interesting. Similar when I hurt my hip, that did tilt my pelvis, right? And then I started having the back pain from the herniated disc, and then I started having neck pain, which was I didn't think about. But the doctor said that your eyes always want to stay level. So if something's kind of off, your head is tilting to make up for it and make everything level. And then that's also just like throwing everything off, right? Everything in your body is connected. And when something's off, or even if there's some imbalance in strength somewhere or some imbalance in flexibility somewhere, like you could have an imbalance in strength or flexibility in one of your legs, and then that can throw off everything to where your back is hurting. And then you might think that the problem is in your back, but in reality, it's something else. So I think what you're saying too with this, just like being mindful of, the positions of your body, how you're doing things, and is so important. Yeah.
I think it's especially if you look at things like gamers, for instance, today, a bunch of kids using their
Mm,
fingers. That's what I would call overexertion of some things. Like you're going
mm,
to start developing hand cramps. You're going to start developing certain things with
yeah.
arthritis in your hands. So many people talk about like the cracking knuckles. I don't know if that's true when it comes to maybe.
Yeah.
It seems like I've seen studies saying it releases air or something like that. So it actually doesn't really affect you a whole lot. But then it's like,
Yeah.
everything does some part.
Yeah, I've heard that just, your tendons or ligaments kind of moving over your bone. But there's actually a study where a man, I think it was like every day for like 40 years or something insane, cracked all of his knuckles on one hand only. And then, yeah, after that study, there was no difference actually, I guess, between his two hands in terms of like arthritis or pain or anything like that. But I agree. It also kind of freaks you out sometimes. I feel like as you're getting older and you like step and then like all of a sudden like your knee and like back, everything's just like cracking and you're just like, what is happening inside of my
Sounds like one of
body?
those things you pop open for dough that make that pop noise. Like that's what I make when
Yeah.
I get out of my bed. My
Yeah.
knees pop
Yeah.
like crazy. Because I always wondered, like
Exactly.
I have like my knees are really like crappy, I would say. And I was like, where does this come from?
Mm,
Like I didn't start experiencing it until recently. Like I was doing legs yesterday and my kneecaps were like going purple. I was like, what? It feels like the bones are rubbing together against each other. And
mm.
my brother, I knew whenever you would hear him walk, his cartilage in his lower part of his like where Achilles heel is, it would snap. Like it just snaps when he walks. It sounds like he's like you're lighting off a firecracker and you're like, what the hell is that? So he took fish oil pills and a bunch of this stuff to help with cartilage down there. You get like a box of it from like GNC or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
everyone in my family has something. Like if I do this, my wrist will click. Like,
Mm.
and it's like I don't understand. Is it how do you fix that? Because I know this rolling of the wrist where it might be like, hey, look at my wrist. It's not gonna be good when I'm like 40. It's gonna suck.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know that you can get rid of it, but I think just not, being intentional about how you're moving and also not worrying about it too much. I think sometimes then we get so worried about it that we can actually move kind of weird. Like if we're so worried about our knee and then we start moving weird and can actually like further damage it or injure something else. I think the best thing to do is just like strengthen it and, keep it flexible and all those good things and trying not to dwell on it or let it sort of hamper the things you want to do, which I guess is easier said than done. But yeah, it can be a little bit scary sometimes. And I think as you're saying, like it sounds like the bone is on bone. And I think that's a big issue as we get older. And, most people develop some sort of osteoarthritis or arthritis. And it's not taken, sometimes it feels like it's not taken very seriously by healthcare providers when they're just saying, oh, you're just getting old, your cartilage is just wearing away, your bones are grating on each other. And it just like puts this terrible image in your mind of like your bones rubbing together and like how like that just sounds so
You're gonna
horrible
turn to
and
dust.
painful. Yeah, exactly. And it's like it doesn't there's still a lot of good things happening in your body. It's not just like your bones are just like smashing together, but it's also then very off-putting to like, okay, I probably shouldn't go walk around on this knee if it's bone on bone. But again, it's like that whole counterintuitive thing where it's actually much better for it if you can keep moving it.
I just feel like every answer a doctor gives somebody if they have pain somewhere is like, why don't you just lay off of it for a little while or maybe take some time to
Yeah.
relax? And I'm like, you're saying like let it sit. It's like you might not experience the pain, but it's not necessarily curing the problem there. You're actually gonna hurt some other things too. Like you need to have your daily movements. I think especially with this lockdown, I was a big priority person on going on your back porch at least and just taking a second to breathe in the air or sit
Mm.
down or at least do some fucking everybody sourdough bacon. Go gardening. You need to have that outside interaction because there's key things involved with that when it comes to your
Mm-hmm.
lungs. Because I mean, after a while, you sit in your room all day, besides spraying Febreze to maybe make it smell nicer. It's a way better feeling when you step outside and take a nice whiff of fresh air. Like it
Yeah.
rejuvenates your body a little bit more. And also getting moving, in my opinion, helps me feel a lot better when I'm sick too.
Yeah, there's actually been research on moving outside and how within 5 minutes, your body's already releasing like stress relieving hormones. And other chemicals. And you're right, like being outside actually like physiologically changes you in a very beneficial way. And I think also thinking, so being very mindful about that, but then also, everything that you do throughout the day, like what are you eating? Is it giving you inflammation that could have, then make your joints more inflamed and more painful? And so I think everything that we're doing is, it's all working together in some way. So it's hard, it's great to like start out, somewhere. And like, I find that doing one thing and seeing the benefits of that can then kind of make it easier to start adding other things on top of that and being more mindful in other places. So, but like you're saying, just getting outside for a couple minutes is like a great place to start.
I think a lot of it does boil down to nutrition, though, too. Like you were saying, I
Yeah.
listened to a podcast with Dr. Mark Gordon. He was on Joe Rogan
Mm,
Experience, but what he does is he
okay.
takes PTSD victims from war,
Mm,
especially people that have been in explosions that like can't produce their own testosterone. And he looks at their nutrition because, and he actually said this before the article came out, but 230,000 people that have gotten coronavirus, for instance, they suffer from severe neurological issues like leftover, and it's
mm,
part and parcel with the fact of their nutrition is off. A lot of
mm,
our nutrition down here, for instance, focuses on very grainy, very gluten-y foods, like stuff that really
yeah.
kind of very, very processed, not very, very clean when it comes to the idea of clean eating, besides like chicken breast. And everyone always says chicken breast and like rice. I'm like, that shit's good. You just got to do it right. Like it's not bad. Like I like it.
That's how I feel about vegetables.
But for instance, he was mentioning that like he thinks that a lot that happens to do with depression, for instance, comes
Hmm.
from our inflammatory system. If you look
Yeah.
at like if I offer you 12 beautiful glazed donuts, you're like, that sounds amazing. Like I'll make your mouth water a
Yeah.
little bit. But then
Yeah.
when after you eat those 12 donuts, you do not feel the same. You feel like crap. You want to go to bed. You want to end up turning the world into Wall-E where we have beds floating for us because it jam packs your system with so much gunk, all the cogs
Yeah.
start stopping a little bit, and then it's got to start reworking. And after a nap or something like that, you have to get up and you feel like trash. That plays a big part, not only in how you feel as a person, but how you treat others as well, too. Because if you're not right with
Oh,
yourself, you're
yeah.
not going to be right with the person that cuts you off when you're driving.
Yeah. Oh, that's so true. And then it's going to affect your sleep, and then that's going to affect you. Like it just has this whole like cascade effect. But it's so funny that you say that too. I'm from the Midwest, but now I live in the Bay Area, and I would say the contrast in food and is just really extreme between the two. And it's actually like quite hard. I feel like when I first went into the Bay, it was kind of like a lot of my friends are from the Midwest, and it's kind of like jokingly like, oh, like organic only, like everyone's just eating, vegetables, and, where's like my burger and stuff. And now like I'm mostly plant-based. And now I come back to the Midwest. I'm actually home right now visiting family, and it's a challenging too to like kind of go from then kind of prioritizing more of an anti-inflammatory diet and more plant-based, and then coming back where it's not, we go out to eat and there's not like a single vegetarian option on the menu.
What made you decide to go vegetarian?
Yeah, I think it's just this it wasn't just like a shift immediately, like just a change out of nowhere, but it's just been over time, just kind of changing more and more to my diet. And just seeing like how this makes me feel. Am I tired after? Do I have more energy? Like what feels good for me? And both like for the environment, for my body, for animals, like it just seemed like a lot of the values that I have like just aligned with that more. And I think with the research coming out too, so women actually definitely don't need as much protein as been hyped up. So men can process protein a little bit better, and so can have more of the animal protein in their diet. But and it's different for everyone, obviously. But I just know that I feel better when I'm having more plants
At least
versus
you're a
like animal
nice
protein.
vegan. Every vegan I've met has like tried to force it down my throat. I'm like, I look,
No.
I'm this type of person. If we both agree pizza is good, I'm going to say
Yeah.
pizza is bad because I want to have that other perspective in there so we can actually
Okay.
talk. Not
Okay.
that I necessarily disagree. So like
You have to
I
play devil's advocate a little bit.
yeah, I don't mean to get
Spice
spark
up
up.
the conversation.
I want to make sure that we're like it's even an issue in politics. You have a bunch of of people in the same room agreeing with you rather than one person raising the opinion that doesn't agree with you. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
I can get a bunch of people that follow me that agree with everything that I say, but I'd rather have a
Yeah.
mix of people with different thoughts and opinions because it enhances your growth, I would say. So like my buddy is hardcore meat, like makes fun of kale. And I put up a comment on his post and I was like, actually, like if you look at my diet, I live in a beach
Mhm.
town, so it's all fish. You know, red meat's
Yeah.
very, very, I haven't had red meat in a very long time just because it doesn't sit well in my stomach anymore. My body is adapted to not need that anymore. But I eat a lot of fish. I eat a lot of chicken.
Mhm.
But the only, like I tell people, if you're going to eat chicken, if you're going to eat meat, I think you should learn where that shit comes from because I
Yes.
went to a chicken plant and I can tell you, instead of cooking up a whole bag of
Oh,
chicken breasts,
yeah.
I will only cook up two because I know I'm not going to waste two chicken breasts. I'm going to eat both of them and then save the rest for when I actually need them. The problem is
Yeah.
overconsumption in this world
Yeah.
because we have the ability to make so goddamn much. Pardon my
Yeah.
French, but it is a fact of like we make way too much. And now people are like, well, then, you know, there's always going to be more. It's like, you want to think, you know
Yeah.
how much food gets wasted on a daily basis? I watch
Oh,
dump
yeah, it's
trucks of food
painful. It's
dumping out
painful.
food. And I'm like, there's homeless people that are starving.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. And it's like, especially it's like, do you need it every single meal? Like, I don't know why there's just this like need where it's like, if you don't have meat, then that's not even like, that's not a full meal. And it like, to me, it's just like shocking. And I'm also not like very strict, but what, like you're saying, like if I'm going out to a nice dinner, like maybe I will have some fish with that, but I will want to make sure that it is wild caught and, you know, not farmed. And, I feel like I'm sounding like such like a Bay Area native now, but it's like it's important, and yeah, it's like you're saying, it things are very like overproduced, and when you do that, it's just it's no longer giving you those like vitamins and minerals that you would get more naturally too. So it's not even like really having those benefits for your body.
I think it's just that food industry is like so mixed backwards on what diet
It
trend's going to be new.
so is. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
the sugar industry lied way back in the day saying that you know, fats were bad for you. And then we all thought, oh my God, if you're gonna eat fat, you're gonna get fat. And then you find out it's all the sugar industry paying off doctors and all these research studies
Yeah.
saying that it's fat. And it's like people are saying, well, 100% meat diet, 100% plant diet. I'm like, fucking, if it works for you, do you, man? Because I had a buddy I
Yeah.
used to work out with in the very beginning. He turned vegan because of his health issues. He was having severe issues with his digestive health. And then he
Mm.
was gaining a lot of weight, unreasonable weight that wasn't going anywhere. He went vegan. Yeah, he consumed more calories to reach his protein content, but he lost a lot of weight. His body started reacting differently to it. He felt like a better person. I'm like, it's all these small little mechanical things that work in the background you don't even realize.
Yeah, yeah, that's so true. And yeah, with the food industry, it's just, it's, I mean, I'm not like any nutrition expert. Like my thing is just like try things and like see what works for you. Like be open to trying things. And like, it just seems so overcomplicated too. So like make it simple, just eat more whole foods and just be mindful of what you're eating. And it can make a huge difference. And I think a lot of people are used to, you know, the diet that they're on and they're like, well, this works for me. And it's like, well, it might, your body like can adapt to really so many things. So it's like just because you're alive and functioning doesn't mean that you might not benefit or like be, you know, have some positive changes to a little bit of a, you know, incorporating small healthier changes here and there.
For instance, like with your research, because I'm kind
Yeah.
of new on this topic, you said
Yeah.
you said,
Yeah. Yeah.
can you repeat that again for me? I don't want to mess it up. You said biomechanical?
Biomechanics. So it's
Okay.
like bio, you know, biology and then mechanics. So kind of like
I think
machines and
about putting
living
a machine.
things.
I think about putting a machine into a
Mm.
person when you say that.
Yeah, well, sometimes we do. So,
Oh my God,
but
no, that
I
scares
mean, if you
me.
think about machines, like in terms of like implants, right? Like that's a mechanical thing. Like that can be a machine, and we make, you know, exoskeletons, like kind of machines on the outside of your body that are helping you move. So, yeah, definitely, like robotics is a big part of biomechanics too. But
See,
yeah, just trying to,
I get scared at that line because I think it's so
yeah,
important if you can
yeah,
say like this person did a drug and decided the sun was very fun to stare at and they burn off their retinas in their eyes. That's happened. I
yeah.
just watched a documentary on that like 2 days
That's
ago.
yeah,
because yeah, when you're taking heroin, the sun looks really freaking nice, and they stare too long, and now their eyes are all like burned out. But they got like an
Yikes.
ocular implant in their eye, and
Yeah.
it helped them like see by putting a picture into their head. And I was like, it was the weirdest thing. I could not explain it 100%, but I was watching, I was like, that's fucking awesome that someone can now see.
Yeah.
But then I'm like, okay, that's the beneficial part of it. But now let's look at the negative. What asshole is going to go outside and stare at the sun because you're telling him you can give him robotic eyes now? It's going to happen.
Yeah. And there's definitely a line there. And for me too, I definitely support this, if somebody, I don't know, I guess kind of coming back to baseline or average, like, I think that's incredible. If we can help someone move again that, hasn't been able to move in years, or like you're saying, see, but yeah, kind of going past that and enhancing performance, I think is definitely, a little hazy. So yeah, but I think it's like, yeah, you can't really stop that. I feel like the research is advancing, and it's like someone's going to do it, right? Like someone's going to try to do these things, and
Like my
we can
biggest
try to.
fear of the Neuralink is that someone is going to go a little bit too far with it. And like there are people that want to overclock things. There are people that want to do this. How long until they can put an advertisement into your head saying, before you can get up out of bed, there's just this advertisement. But I watched
Oh, okay.
a Neuralink get put into a monkey. And I know it sounds like sci-fi movies, but we're technically living in like a
Yeah.
sci-fi kind of movie era age. Besides the flying cars and stuff like that, we're doing tremendous things. I think it went from building machines that were going to be like our servants or our butlers or whatever, like the Jetsons or something like that, so now we want to put those implants inside of us, and I see the benefit in that. But the issue is we have idiots, or I wouldn't say idiots, people that are not very smart, that would blow themselves up in a car accident to get insurance money. So if you think a person wouldn't chop their legs off or burn their legs off to be able to get robotic legs, here's where the thing comes in, because in some aspects you might be able to sympathize with their situation. And I toss this example out in a podcast because we always love talking about robotic stuff. Because I'm so bland as shit. I still have to walk into my house and flick the light switch. My buddy is all technology. So when you go up to his doorbell, Alexa says hello to you and says, what's like the passcode to get into the house? And you're like, and then you say the passcode, and then you walk into his room. There's no remotes anywhere. I'm like, how do I turn on the TV? He's like, we don't use remotes in this house. And then he pulls like, okay, Alexa, TV on, and the TV turns on. I'm like, oh, that's nuts, man. Does it flush for you too? He's like, it can. I'm like,
Funny you should say that.
But it just, you look at it like, if a
Yeah.
kid is bullied, let's say a little boy is getting made fun of because he's very, very small and very, very weak compared to the other ones. And then this kid sees an advertisement on TV about a guy who got new legs, and now his legs are stronger and faster. Kid decides to hurt himself to try and get the same exact surgery to get the same leg implants. That's where I can sympathize, because people,
Yeah.
that pain of bullying can push someone to that. But it's hard, because it's, once you start going, you want to keep moving that goalpost to see how far we can get it. And I'm just like, if nothing's broken, then you don't need to break something to try and get something. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, I totally agree. Actually, so like if you look at Blake Leeper, he is an amazing athlete, and he's a sprinter, and he's a double amputee. We had him on our podcast maybe like a year ago, when he had to battle to be able to try to run in the Olympics, because his time qualified him. And he wanted to run against these better runners because he was that fast. But then the Olympics was pushing back, saying, actually, your prosthetics are potentially so advanced that they're giving you an advantage, which is, for biomechanics, it's like, wow, it's kind of amazing that that's where the technology is at, that it's actually, people are putting up a fight, that it might be helping people beyond what would be their natural abilities. But it's actually, a really hard story for him, trying to fight that. And I think they decided against letting him compete in the Olympics. He's an amazing person, and I'm sure he'll like continue to move forward with that. But yeah, things like that, where it's like, it's hard to draw the line. So he was working with a biomechanist to try to look at, how he pushed off the blocks, how he sprinted, obviously, how he cut and did turns, to try to compare that to what might be possible, and more, with an able body athlete, and see, are his prosthetics actually giving him an advantage? Can we prove that in some way? But it's really, hard to do that when you can't just compare the two. But yeah. So it's definitely improving that way. But I agree. I feel like anything that you could do that's more natural, is great. And that's kind of in my research. So one thing that we do for people with osteoarthritis in their knee, you can actually change the way that you're walking to offload your knee, in certain ways, depending on where your arthritis is located in your knee, on the inside or the outside. And you can change how you walk. So you might be able to lean more to the side or less to the side. What we study in our lab is actually changing the angle of your foot. So moving your foot in, like kind of like pigeon-toed or out, can change the forces going through your knee. And so you can have a person walk in different ways and sort of predict the forces going through their knee, and then train them to walk in the way that lowers it the most. And so that's just one example of a way that, the way that we're moving day to day, we can perhaps just sort of tweak that to help whatever, problem or that we want to change, whether that's pain or some other biomechanical.
Do you think it's also about kind of stopping it before it goes down the hill too? Because I feel like I've always talked about the one sense I would be afraid to lose would probably be my sense of touch, just because like, I don't know, ever since saying that like 5-6 years ago, I just always have said it. That's like the one thing I would ask someone, what sense would you be afraid to lose? Most people say sight. Yeah, that'd be fucking terrible to lose sight, hearing, any of them. But sense of touch is like, I don't know, it just makes me feel grounded. Since I have ADHD, I like to rub my fingerprints together and really feel like I'm here right now. I feel like you can examine things you're doing if you really take the time to understand, like, I am leaning way too much weight on one side of my body. I'm at work, I don't have a stool to sit in, so I'm leaning up against something that's putting pressure on my hips, that's doing this, that's not there's subtle things that you can really focus in on if you truly, that can stop an issue from happening. And with the biomechanical enhancements, for instance, I think they're fucking amazing. I just think that we need to fix the issue of the competitive nature with most people. I would say, I think this society that we're in kind of brings up this competitive type style ego, where it's like someone's got to win. I got to be better than that person. And I'm like, for the man
work
that
longer hours, and I'm going to sleep less.
And like, for the man that has no vision, and he gets an ocular implant where now he can see his family again, and then a person sees that and goes, well, he's got robotic eyes that can see farther than my eyes. Well, fuck it. And they take a fucking fingers right into their head. I'm like, that's what happens. We need to fix that core issue and understand that you need to look at the grand spectrum of things, which is the beneficial part of your research, for instance, is helping people from these types of things, like being able to do things that you can't do because of something that happens to you, not because you feel like, oh, this person's going to be better than me, so let's make you a super robot. No, we're trying to make people, because it's very, very hard. For instance, when you mentioned the guy that wasn't allowed to go into the Olympics because of his amputee legs, it's also, they're probably not even thinking of the factor of how people look at running against an amputee and be like, there might be a factor of them slowing down because they might feel, it's all these subtle things that you got to kind of examine. And that's probably where they were coming from with it. But it's an aspect of like, it's giving someone a chance to do something that they never probably thought they would be able to do again, which is why I think it's very important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's hard. You always have to think about how people might take it too far, and you can try to plan against it. But yeah, I think what you're saying, and kind of taking that perspective of looking at the bigger picture, and also, being grateful for everything that you have and looking at it in that way, can definitely help with that. And I think, so I think AI and machine learning, so that's something I also use in my work to then try to like take things that we can do in the lab and move them outside of the lab so that more people have access to these types of things. Because I think that's another thing too, is like, if we're only doing things in the lab, like, we're only able to help a small subset of people that might be, people that have access to these things, like have a car to drive there, have, so they're mobile, they might, live in a certain area. And for me too, that's like, we don't want to also only give access to these things to people who either have money or who who are living in the right place, or like these have these certain characteristics, like we want to let everyone use them. So I think that's another benefit though of this AI technology, is that, and the way it's advancing, is that we can take things and make them accessible to people who really need them. And I think using it in that way is going to be really impactful positively on society, versus trying to just continue to advance it for a small subgroup of people.
I think like in the solution I can see is like if you made them advanced, but not so advanced to where they surpass the natural, I guess.
Yeah.
But then that brings up the issue of like, then it's like, okay, yeah, it's helping. It might stop people even from deterring from hurting themselves to be able to get an enhancement. But at the same time,
Mm.
it's also about trying to make it normal too. You know, the reason why we have so many movies where robots are wearing human skin or wearing some like flesh thing, like
Mm.
Real Doll. Does anybody even talk about Real Doll? Remember that the humans, the sex doll? It looked exactly like a person, and everyone was like, "Oh my god, it's gonna be crazy time." Yeah, that was so, but you could tell because the uncanny valley where their facial features didn't line up enough to where you could be like, there's something off. That's not a human. That's a robotic person, even though as realistic as it looks, because we want it to feel normal. We want it to feel comfortable when someone walks in and they have like, let's say a robotic hand, but it looks just like my hand, for instance. You're not
Mm.
deterred from it. You don't stare, which is important because I don't think anybody who has a robotic hand or has something of a robotic enhancement that's, robotic legs, for instance, you don't want people fucking staring at you. Like there's a guy at my gym. He has prosthetic or robotic like metal legs, I would say. And he
Mm-hmm.
always wears camo, like the military camo. So for
Mm-hmm.
years, I thought he got his legs blown off in the war. Then I asked him about it like a
Mm-hmm.
month ago. So for 3 years, I built up this fucking story in my head of him being like a lone survivor hero. And I go, man, we talk a lot. I got to ask, what happened to your legs, man? He just goes, diabetes. I was like, I
Wow.
shouldn't have even asked because I thought of you as a fucking hero. And then now I'm just like, oh, okay. I mean, he's still a good guy, but I was messing with him. I
Yeah.
was like, damn, dude, I thought you lost him in the war. He's like, why? And I'm like, because you wear the military hat. He goes, no, man. I was way out of the service when I lost my legs. I was like, okay, sorry.
Yeah.
I built up this
Yeah.
war hero story. I was literally going to bring flowers to you and be like, thank you for your service.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, that's funny that that's just not what you're expecting. But I think that brings up another good point though, is like, I think this idea too that we have in our culture that like a disability is like less than or something, where I think also we can shift that narrative too, to like it and to, well, what does someone with a disability want to do? Do they want to be able to do what we think they want to be able to do, or like what's important to them? And I think designing for individual people and considering like a disability is not as like something that's hindering people, but like thinking about, okay, well, what can they do? Like, what are the advantages of that? Like, what can we learn from that? And not necessarily seeing it in such a negative light. I think too with prosthetics, like for such a long time, and it depends on different cultures see prosthetics differently. So in some cultures, they're really viewed quite negatively, where people want to hide them and they want them to look as natural as possible. Versus in other cultures, they're, like you're saying, they might have lost a limb in the war, or fighting for the country, and they're really proud of that and want to show them. And or you have athletes who just want them to be as functional as possible, but might not care what they look like. Or women want to wear high heels, and so maybe they don't want the advances of an athlete in their prosthetic. They just want them to be able to wear the shoes that they want to wear. And even men, there is a researcher I was talking to recently where she's from Texas, I think, and the men wanted to wear cowboy boots. So she wanted to, design some new prosthetics to work with that. So I think, yeah, there's also just this need, I think, to just really focus on an individual basis of like what people want, and just like viewing it more positively and in
It's just that
a
word
way that's,
disability. That word
yeah,
disability, when you
yeah.
say it, it makes it sound like the word different. Like out of all the
Mm,
words in our cancel culture or whatever's been changed,
mm,
that's the one word that actually should be super changed, which is disability. Because I had talked to a person that was like, she was like, I have a mentally challenged daughter, and I was like,
mm,
mentally challenged. I was like, that's awesome that you like, you talk to her, you help her with her work. I'm like, that's
mm.
awesome. But I was like, what does she have? And then she just goes ADHD. And I'm like, hold the fucking phone. I have ADHD. I'm
Mm,
not mentally challenged. She goes, don't tell me my daughter has ADHD. I'm like, I have it myself. It might be a learning
yeah.
like disability, but I'm not on the spectrum. She goes, learning disability is another word in the education system for mentally challenged. And she was a teacher. And I was like, oh, our education system's fucked. Like, I was like, I freaked out. I freaked out
Yeah.
because I was like,
Yeah.
I'm not on the spectrum. But then I had this thought of, you ever thought you were retarded and nobody's telling you? And I was like, that was me
Mm,
through school. Is the school thought I was mentally challenged. And I'm like, I'm not. I just have too much
yeah.
energy. I can't sit still. I can't be a
Yeah.
normal functioning person without getting up out of my seat and needing to sharpen a pencil 50 times. But it's
Yeah.
that word has it's there, I guess,
It's
implanted
so
in. Yeah,
stigmatized.
it's
Yeah.
as soon as you say it, you immediately think anything that person does, you have to sympathize for them because they're not ever going to be able to compete at the normal level of a person. And I'm like, that's not fucking true.
Right. It's not true. And that might not even be their goal. So, like, who are we to decide what another person's goals and values are and what they want out of life? Like, I think a lot of times as engineers, we're like designing for what we think is best. But in reality, we need to talk to the people we're designing for. We need to know what they want and what they care about in their life and design for that. And
And stop
yeah,
attacking academics. That get
yeah.
that gets me more than anything. I'm not even an academic, but I've talked to so much people with PhDs or doctorates, whatever,
Yeah,
that all talk
yeah.
about like it's so hard to get my research out because now science is on the chopping block. And I'm like, I get it if like maybe it's against what you feel, but at the same time, I'd like
Mm,
to fucking know if there's a black hole at any moment that could suck up my planet that I'm living in,
that
so
seems
I
fair.
can plan
Yeah.
accordingly, maybe.
Yeah.
And then I
Yeah.
hear Eric Weinstein, very intelligent guy, but is on the
Yeah.
spectrum of things, but you wouldn't be able to tell by, I guess, unless you were listening to a long form like Joe Rogan podcast with him, you can
Mhm.
see some certain mannerisms that were kind of a little bit
Mhm.
awkward, I would say. But he was talking about Harvard was literally causing people to stop their research papers that were in good standing, telling them they needed to move and it would
Mm.
affect their research, all because it didn't agree with what Harvard thought. And I was like, oh my God. So
Wow.
the fucking school you're going to is stopping you from doing your research and being able to come up with a study. Not only people are stopping other people from doing that. I see PhDs that are being protected on Twitter all the time saying, today I defend my PhD. I'm like, what the fuck's that? What do you mean? We have new science.
Well, everyone has to defend it to be able to graduate. But I think the wording is, yeah, a little bit misleading. But I think it's more of a defending that you did good quality work
Okay.
versus like defending that this is like real.
I thought like you could like post it and then like 10 years later you're sitting on like a beach in Cancun and the next thing you know they're like, hey, your PhD is on fire. It's like, what do you
Is
mean?
canceled.
Yeah.
No, I think this is such a good point. But I think also I think it's sometimes people are so attached to their work and their theories, and it's like anything against that is just wrong. But it's like I once heard a professor say, I'll be happy when somebody proves my theory's wrong because I mean, science has advanced to the point where they can actually understand it better and prove that that's not right. And for me, that's always key to think about it that way, where it's like things are always advancing, things are always proving, like we're just doing the best we can with what we have right now. And to be excited for advances in research versus like personally, like feeling like personally attacked or feeling the need to like defend some potentially like outdated theories, like it's just like we need to take a step back and do things for the betterment of society versus like our, protecting our ego.
My astrophysicist friend, Dr. Serene Nemi, she was on here telling me about like especially a lot with science and about how it's on the chopping block a little bit. But there was a
Mm-hmm.
podcast with Avi Loeb, I think his name is, but he is an astrophysicist. And he was actually when that giant meteor was in the sky and everyone's like, what is that? And then they passed the alien COVID bill and all that stuff. That was like,
Yeah,
oh my
yeah.
God, alien information. I was so excited. But his theory was that it comes from an extraterrestrial planet because there's just so much thing. It's not a comet, it's not an asteroid. There's something, a different classification for it, and it's like so much like a pencil, so fine detailed that it's like
Yeah.
this has to be from a civilization or something. And people
Wow.
were attacking him on social media, and he has no social media, so he had no way to defend himself. So people
Mm.
that had studied a paper, he was wondering why he was getting so much conflict with it. Because someone that studies a research and makes a theory, that's been spent 60 years in the making. Now you're saying that's going to refute their opinion. And instead of wanting to better the human race, you take it as a personal attack. And
Yeah.
that we need to fix that, because we're going to keep
Yeah.
shooting ourselves in the foot if we can't just be like, okay, well, we think differently now, but this is now the new science. Yours is not wrong. It's just this is the new stuff we have now. You still did good work.
Yeah. Yeah. Now we have new technologies, new way to measure things and understand things and learn things. And like, to me, that's super exciting. And, maybe in 60 years, I hope I'll not think differently to that, when things that, I'm doing might not be what is considered true anymore. But yeah, I think it's just this perspective of just like, we're always learning and advancing, and that's going to happen. It's nothing personal against us, but just trying to just learn more as a whole, as society.
But I have no clue, because I'm only 23 years old in Ocean City, Maryland, doing a podcast with an ISIS curtain behind his back. So, I mean, that's just my
Yeah.
thoughts and opinions. I'm tossing it out there. Melissa, we've been talking for a
Yeah.
good bit. Where can people find your podcast, for instance? You're a host as well. And also, where can people find any
Yeah.
of your plugs, social media?
For sure. Yeah. So we were talking about disability a bit, and we actually next month, I'm excited to have this like disability, accessibility, mobility series on the podcast. So if you want to listen to our podcast, it's called Biomechanics on Our Minds. But we do talk kind of a broad range of things. And you can find it on all the places that you'd find podcasts, Spotify, iTunes, SoundCloud. And you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter too, but most active on Instagram and Twitter. And for me personally, you can find me on Twitter, Melissa Boswell _. You can also find me on Instagram, but that's less like sciencey, more personal life, but I'm there too.
Well, I'll make sure I link it all in the description. Thanks for listening to this
Thank
episode of Out of the
you.
Blank podcast.